So now I'm going to share some thoughts with you about the feeding of the crowd. Not here from the studio, as I normally do, but from a short excerpt of a documentary series about Jesus in Galilee. This was filmed at Bethsaida by the plains where Jesus took the fish and broke the bread and fed the multitudes. Bethsaida is an important place within the Gospels because it's the place where some of the most significant disciples actually came from. But the story I want to tell you begins some distance from here. The disciples are gathering together and they're telling what they've achieved, the stories they've told, the things that they've seen, and they're sharing those stories as any group of friends would, but significantly as a group of friends who are following Jesus. The crowds were keeping them busy. They were coming and going, making requests, wanted to hear stories, and wanted to be very much part and near this new group of people that was making such an impression upon the area. Jesus knew that they really hadn't had some food. They'd been so busy. He said to them, let's go to a quiet place. And that's become a kind of verse for people who want to find retreat. Come, let's go to a quiet place. That's what he says to the disciples. And so he led them. He led them to a boat. The boat and Galilee are so intricately bound in the story of Jesus. They got into the boat and they went. Now, at the same time, the crowd that had been part of all that was happening with the disciples saw what they were doing. It's as if the news went from one to another saying, let's go and see where he's going. And we're told in the scriptures that they ran and they outran the boat, so that when Jesus got off the boat, the truth was that they were there ready to greet him. Jesus got off the boat and looked at this crowd before him, and that's actually where we get that lovely verse that he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He realized that these people were so eager to listen to what he got to say, so eager to hear this new teaching, that they would run in the heat to go and be beside him. And it was a remote place, as this indeed is a remote place. It was a remote place, no shops nearby, and there might have been easily an argument for the disciples going off and getting whatever it is you get in those days to be able to feed themselves and to feed the crowd that was there, because the crowd was enormous. It was getting late in the day, they had nothing to eat, and so they go and they make a request of Jesus as to what they should do. And Jesus then says, you feed them. I mean, what a question that was. What a statement that was. You feed them? Well, that's the last thing that they could do. They had so little resources of themselves. You feed them. And so they go off to look at what the resources were. And there are two things that we notice. Firstly, in John's Gospel, it tells us that they say a little lad. In fact, Andrew finds a little lad, a little boy, who's got to offer what he has. And what he offers is 5 loaves and 2 fishes. That's all he had, and that's what he was able to offer. Now, very clear instructions were given to the disciples to arrange everybody into groups of people. And here's another lovely insight in Mark's Gospel. The Gospel writer, who is always very, very keen on detail, tells us the grass was green, which would tell us this was probably spring. Some rains had come. The grass looked beautiful, not as it does today, but in those days it was so green everywhere. And they were able to sit down. They were down in rows and groups, and the disciples served the food that Jesus blessed, reminding us of how he would bless meals so often in the story of the Christian faith. And the food was taken out, and it was impossible to imagine such a multiplication. From 5 loaves and 2 fishes, such a great crowd was fed. And here's the bottom line. When it was all over, there were 12 basketfuls left over. No, you don't expect me to be able to easily explain that. All I know is this. It's interesting that it's recorded in all 4 Gospels and that it becomes such an important part of the stories of Jesus. I think the overriding message is this, that Jesus Christ is able to take whatever it is we offer and do far more abundantly over and above anything we can imagine by the use of his power and his grace. That would be a story that would imprint itself on the disciples' minds, not only in one moment, but I think for all time. Hope you found those thoughts insightful. People wonder why I'm wearing a hat and why it looks like it 35 degrees centigrade, let me tell you. But very important how Jesus fed the crowds. Do keep an eye out for the series when it comes.